Hello, welcome to Sad and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I'm doing a book review of John Brunner's Polymath. This is a book from 1974. It's from Daw. It is a classic sci-fi. I found this book, as usual, at a used bookstore. It is going to be one of my classic sci-fi book reviews. If you have not watched one of these before, basically I go through and do a small kind of initial review with no spoilers. Then I go through a synopsis that I have concocted from my brain that doesn't work all the time, so it's usually entertaining because of that. And then I go through my classic sci-fi bingo, where I talk more about the book based on some prompts, and I try to see if this book will get a bingo on the chart. So I promised last time that I would pick a classic sci-fi that was more interesting to review. The last one that I reviewed, Across of Empire, was boring as heck. I didn't even like reading it. But this book is amazing. There's so much to talk about, and not a rant. I'm going to talk about this book so much because it's an absolute stunner. It's fantastic. I really loved it. I mean, John Brunner is fantastic. But anyway, what is this book about? Nameless New World. Colonizing a new planet requires much more than just settling on a newly discovered island of old Earth. New planets were different in thousands of ways, different from Earth and from each other. Any of those differences could mean death and disaster to a human settlement. When a ship filled with refugees from a cosmic catastrophe crash-landed on such an unmapped world, alliteration much, their outlook was precarious. Their ship was lost, salvage had been minor, and everything came to depend on one bright young man accidentally among them. He was a trainee planet builder. It would have been his job to foresee all the problems necessary to set up a safe home for humanity. But the problem was that he was a mere student, and he had been studying the wrong planet. Okay, so the blurb does a bit of a disservice about this book because it's about so much more than that. This book has a fantastic world building with a really cool alien planet, a very human problem to contend with, great tension, wonderful characters, including women with actual goals and personalities, and excellent descriptions. While Lex the Polymath is the main character, the story is as much about him coming into his own for the community than a story about him personally. It's very much a community story, which was so interesting to me. This gave it a real sense of urgency and purpose. It's a very clever, thoughtful, intricate book. I love stories of people surviving on new planets, and this one starts well after they've crashed and have now started to build a colony. This approach was really cool, as I've always been really interested in stories of people building new settlements and learning about their worlds, more so than the direct aftermath of a ship crashing. I can't say C words today. That is interesting too, but I really like more when, we're not dealing with everyone's sad and freaking out because there was a crash and people are all hurt. I'd rather kind of start where this book started, and I really liked that. Brunner, as I've mentioned, is a great writer. He's the author of The Sheep Look Up, which was an awesome post-apocalyptic book. This book is testament to his skill as well. It's also part of a series, I learned. This is book 2, so I need to find the other 2. I guess this the planet Zarathustra, where everyone's. I'll talk about it in the thing, but it's kind of, I think, a bunch of ships all from that disaster went to different planets, and that's really cool. I want to find all the other ones. This book does not say that at all. That's part of a series, and that's what I find so fascinating about these classic sci-fi books. I guess because it's almost like they're not all produced by the same publisher. You'll get 2 books from different in a series from different publishers, and so they don't list it on here. It's so fascinating to me. I love the kind of wild westness of classic sci-fi publishing. So anyway, I highly recommend this book if you haven't read it yet. And now I'm going to go into my spoiler-filled review. So if you plan on reading this, please do not pay attention to the rest of this review. Thank you for checking it out, though. Here we go. So again, I may have things mixed up or stuff wrong because I'm doing this pretty much just kind of off the cuff. So the story starts with Lex and another man heading towards a downed spaceship which is underwater, because I guess that's where they landed. Or no, sorry, the ship crashed, they all got out, and then the ship rolled into the water. They kind of explain this in passing. Anyway, so they want to see what they can salvage now that the winter is kind of coming. The captain, Arbogast, refuses to go down at the last second because he's having some PTSD because all of his crew pretty much died. So Lex is like, I guess I'll do it. Lex finds, nothing. They then have a council meeting with the town where Lex explains that they can't fix the ship. This has been the hope of the populace, that they could fix the ship and take off again. So they need to start making the colony a viable forever colony. Some people are pissed off about this. One woman wants them to go on a mission to find another spaceship that had crashed in the distance on the same planet. Due to the strain of all of this and some other stuff, we don't really get too much about him. Arbogast shoots himself. He gone. There are some interpersonal things that happen kind of between this and then kind of the rest of the story. Mainly this woman, Delvia, she has some wanton ways. This is kind of brought in to show how the society functions. There's also a doctor. We learn a lot about his situation. We kind of learn about little bits and pieces of situations, and we learn kind of how the society is structured, who's controlling what, who's doing what to kind of make it work. We learn about the things that they've undertaken to make it livable for them, such as, synthesizing allergens for food, things like that. Eventually, so they're building this kind of river. There's a river that runs to their town. They want to use this for, I guess, for power and for water and for drinking, all that stuff. But then the water suddenly dries up. Because of this, Lex is like, okay, guys, I got to admit something. I've had polymath augmentations and some years of training. I know you have to listen to me. I know what's happening here with the water. And so everyone's like, what? A polymath is an integral part of terraforming in this kind of world building. So he's had like some augmentations done to his eyes and his ears. He's kind of like got super hearing and super sight, things like that. He's been trained to kind of like to almost like understand how the world works, how the world is connected. He sees patterns, I guess, that other people don't really see. We're not getting a ton on this, but I thought it was really, really fascinating. Anyway, so he decides that he needs to take a team to figure out what's happening. They take most of their guns, and they head up the mountain to find out that the dam has been people made. It's been created. It's not natural. And he's like, I expected this. The people that did this were the other ship, the one the woman wanted them to find. But they find out that the people are captives of these few men, the leader named Gomes, and they're being forced to work to the bone to like dig up materials and like work on the ship so they can have it take off. And these people are like, they're basically enslaved. They don't, they live chained up. They get whipped if they don't work. They have barely any food. They're starving, all this stuff. So Lex is like, I gotta talk to this guy, and he's nuts. He's just, plain crazy. He locks them up. One of the guards and his girlfriend, who's another guard, they have a plan to spring the people free. They pull it off. They all take off and escape, but they don't have their guns. A while later, back home, Gomes comes down with his team. He's got all the guns. He's like, I want all this stuff you guys have. I want food. I want water. I want all of this. Lex is like, sure, do what you want. Do what you want. And the town's all pissed off. And he's like, guys, no, I got a plan. So then they take all this stuff. They take Lex with them. And then he uses his kind of his skills to escape in the night. He whittles down Gomes's men by kind of leading them into like traps in the wilderness. Like, there's one I'll talk about in the bingo that's really cool. And then they essentially reach the enslaved people. They've rescued them. Gomes and his men go into the ship to like kind of hole up in there, and they think they're just going to hang out. It's like, okay, let's get everybody away while they're in there. We'll deal with them later. Ship starts to take off. And Lex is like, no, it's not going to work. He's like, oh my God. Because his idea was that, yeah, we could probably get the ship to work in about 10 years, but we got to live here for a while first. We got to do it the right way. Because the problem is it can take off, but it can't break atmosphere, right? It's not strong enough. And that's exactly what happens. The ship crashes and, explodes in the ocean. And that's the end of the story. It's a hopeful ending because Lex is like, well, now we can build our colony. And he and Delvia are like, yeah, it'll still be fun. Okay. It was awesome. It was so good. I really loved this book. Okay, I'm going to go to my classic sci-fi bingo. So outdated science. Actually, not really. There's a huge focus on radios, but that makes sense given their situation. That kind of like the most basic form of technology would work because they're more complicated stuff. Like they can't get a signal out. There's no satellites, right? So they can't bounce any signals off to get a message out to kind of any other colonies in the or like the greater human collective, whatever they are. We don't really learn anything about how the outer kind of humans, how they work. If there's any kind of government or anything like that. Spaceship blows up. Yes, it's a fabulous blow-up scene. I will read it to you. Back down the blue field of the morning, out beyond the land where the reflection of the sun lay like a road of gold across the smooth summer sea, the ship returned. Lucifer cast from heaven, it tore the sky asunder and rode the terrible light of its own destruction downward to the water and was gone. Where it plunged, there came back a single monstrous bubble full of flames. A long time later, the sea beat sluggishly against the beach. So yeah, they did. Social changes, yes. This was so interesting to me because this book came out in this version's from 1974, but the book, the copyright says this from a shorter and substantially different version of the novel appeared in 1963. So I'm very glad that I have the unabridged version, I guess. So given this book was written in the 60s and 70s, the fact that it includes a lot about reproductive justice blew my mind. Abortion in this book is completely normalized to the point where a few people discuss asking a woman to have one simply because it doesn't make sense for their situation and to prevent jealousy, as people were told not to have kids. Like couples were like, you can't have kids right now because of the situation. So they want to prevent some kind of like societal problem. And they decide that forcing her wouldn't be fair or ethical because, yeah, it's her body. But she elects to have one anyway as she doesn't want to have a kid. What? A woman deciding what she wants to do with her own body and no one trying to control her? People don't even have that today. And it's just like a painless shot too. Like no big hullabaloo D&C. Like I was like, okay, this is awesome. Also, I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but women in the book are invited to participate in fighting. There are women in STEM. There are women on the council. No one makes sexist remarks. And while a woman is called hysterical at one point, a man is also called hysterical at one point. So I'm like, okay. This is great. Great social changes. Tied to this, a sexy female scientist. There are no sexy female scientists because no one is hypersexualized. Cool aliens. Nope, there's no aliens, unfortunately. There's no ancient tech or ruins. There is a generation ship. The ship they were on was technically a generation ship. There's no space soldiers. There's no AI or robots. There are definitely new worlds. The birds are super cool in this book. I'm going to read about them because it's neat. So also at one point the bird like takes a crap on someone's head while he's like ranting on and on during a council meeting, and that was just hilarious. I wonder where those birds go for the winter, Lex murmured. Maybe we should follow their example. Aldrich gave a harsh laugh. Won't do us much good, he said. One of Bendel's people told me about them. They aren't migratory. They encapsulate, secrete a kind of gelatinous shell for themselves and spend the winter stuck to the rocks. They thought they were eggs at first, but the eggs are being laid now. So neat. Like, we don't need that information, but I just love that we've provided it. It just kind of really expands on how different and interesting this world really is. I also thought that the way the world wasn't suited for humans was super cool. I mentioned that they have to synthesize vitamins, the anti-allergen powder for the food, for the planet, for food that grow from the planet. And the planet also gave them some sores and stuff due to not being suited for them. You never see that kind of thing in other ones. It's just like, oh, we live on this planet. It's perfectly fine. But it's like, no, this one's like, there's stuff here that we can't deal with. The best thing about it is that there's these black bag creatures. They look like garbage bags, but are carnivorous. They lie across the ground, and when you step on them, like... Yet his approach to dealing with them is amazing. We don't even do what he does, like, here on our own planet. An hour from town, they passed the dead remains of one of the black bag monsters, presumably the one which had killed a man on the party's coastward journey. They were astonishingly numerous. Something would eventually have to be done to protect humans from them, though they could not be eliminated. Their ecological function, obviously, was to prevent herbivores overgrazing the plants. Like, we don't even consider that here. Like, we're just like, oh, this species, let's just get rid of it because it's inconvenient. It's like, yeah, but that species is like, it feeds all these other species. Like, how come people were smarter in the 60s than they are now? Cyberpunk. No, it's not a cyberpunk. Blatant sexism, as I've mentioned, absolutely not. This is the least sexist book from this time period I think I've ever read. I mentioned stuff earlier. I'm not going to go more into this really, but here's just a few more things. Delvia is a mechanic. During the expedition, more than one woman is part of it. There's not just one token woman, and the women contribute just as much as the guys. There are women in STEM. There's a botanist woman. Women aren't mistreated. They aren't disparaged. They're not won as prizes, and they're not set dressing. I absolutely loved it. I was like, why can't all books be like this? There's no reptile aliens. LGBTQ+. Holy crap. I rarely see this too. I put it on the chart as kind of like a to make it less easy for books to win. But there is gay characters in this book. Now there's two gay characters that we know of. So there's a bit of the bisexual promiscuity stereotype though. This is, if you don't know, if you read any books kind of prior to like 2010, if there's a bi character, chances are they're very promiscuous. It's just like a stereotype, and this book definitely engages in that. So Delvia, she's the one who's a bisexual. She's dating a woman. She also has sex with a lot of men. Yet she isn't vilified for being bi in the plot, and neither does a lesbian she's dating die or no longer be a lesbian at the end. Because sometimes that happens too. You'll have like two women who are lovers, and then in the end, one of them dies and the other one like just marries a man. And it's like, no, like Delvia was clearly set up as bi from the start. Of course, she's going to get with Lex because they actually do a really good job showing how they are a great team, and he really respects her, and he thinks, and he's like the only one that takes her side when people are like mad at her. So basically, here's the goss. So Delvia, they have this house for single women, they have a house for single men, and then they have like kind of little tiny houses for couples. So she's in the single woman's house. The youngest member of the expedition to survive, like who survived, because apparently they had babies, but they didn't make it. She's like 16 or 17. She's sick of all the people mothering her, and Delvia has no interest in being motherly, and so she like latches on to Delvia, and something sexual kind of develops. Delvia's in her early 20s, so not the best idea, Delvia, but okay. Anyway, but the woman, what's her name? Nadine, I think. Nadine gets really obsessed with Delvia, and Delvia is like, I don't want that kind of relationship. I thought this was just like a fun thing. So Delvia goes off and has sex with a couple dudes. Nadine is like heartbroken by this, and it's just like this is like I don't know why this whole thing was a big deal in the community. And anyway, yeah, so I can't remember why I was telling you this, just for interest's sake. Anyway, it was interesting because I'm like, you never see complex relationships either with gay characters in books. They're usually just like, oh, this guy's gay, oh my god, or or they're just like written off in the characters. So it was great that they actually had a dynamic. Portals, there's no portals, there's no microfiche. The male MC being a dick? No, Lex is great. Not only is he smart and take charge and he's not arrogant, but at one point Ornell, this kind of Karen-like lady, she tries to convince Lex to date Nadine. So after Delvia kind of dumped Nadine, so Ornell is grieving her two daughters who died, like in the Exodus that I'm going to talk about in a minute. So she kind of sees Nadine as like her pseudo daughter. And she knows that Lex will be the town leader. Essentially, she can tell that he's smart, that people respect him. And so obviously she's trying to like, because she sees herself as like kind of like Nadine's stand-in mother, she's like, oh, if I hook Nadine up with Lex, then, I'll have a bit of a say in this community. She's very crafty. But Lex is like, no. First of all, this girl isn't into dudes. Second of all, she's barely out of her teens, and I'm in my late 20s. And also, she's really upset and vulnerable. He's like, absolutely not. And I'm like, wow, that's a very low bar to pass. But I was like, good for you, Lex. Stand up to her. Yeah, I mean, he does actually consider it for a minute. He's like, yeah, I mean, it would make sense because Nadine is also like brilliant. She's like some kind of a prodigy. And so he's like, yeah, we would make some very smart children in the future. But he's just like, no, wait a minute, that's weird. Anyway, post-apocalyptic, yes, in the sense that Zarathustra, the original planet, had its sun go supernova and everyone had to flee. So that's post-apocalyptic, or apocalyptic anyway. Wild weapons, yep, as usual, laser guns. They have beamers, which are like big, like lasers, flamethrowers. Racial equality, yes, people of color are mentioned. They're mentioned, their skin color is mentioned in passing, and then that's it. And there's no racism retention in that regard. And I was like, yay, it's Star Trek world. It's great. Mind possession, no. There's no galactic war. There's no tech from today, actually. There's not a lot of tech because they're kind of just living off the land. The Bechdel test, it passed on the first page. I was like, what? Shocking. There's no quick bonus, though. There's no alien human romance. There's no female main character. And there's no derelict ship because the ship is at the bottom of the sea. I guess that's technically derelict, but it's not derelict in the way that, it's not like they stumble across a derelict ship. It's a ship that they were on and now are not. Yeah, so highly recommend Polymath. I mean, I kind of ruined the whole story for you, but if not, you should still check it out. It's so good. And I love this cover. It's so, like, kind of quaint. Like, it's ridiculous looking. Like, why is the spaceship an airplane? But whatever. It's fine. The little moon's just hanging out there. Oh, also, planet builders dare not fail. I love it. Okay, thanks for watching.